Welcome to Franchise Killer, a podcast where we talk about movie franchises or wannabe franchises, review them film by film, and see where things went wrong. Or
all right.
I am Reese. Across from me we have
David.
To his left,
Irina.
To my right,
Alan.
Toodles.
There's no good... they're all varying levels of...
Generic people
I'm
names.
John. Or
also known as
whatever. Noah.
The movie we're talking about again is Contagion. It's a movie that came out in 2011. It's directed by Steven Soderbergh, a director that we've talked about already in Noah, one of your miniseries.
I knew I recognized this film style. I wasn't paying attention to who
it feels
the
just like
director
the
was.
Ocean's movies.
But there was this vibe about it that was very much familiar, and it was, just that from person to person passage of kind of disease-like things. He likes to do that.
Oh,
Ocean's
I never
11.
thought about that. That is a connection.
Yeah, so we did cover Ocean's 11, 12, 13, and 8. He didn't do 8, but I think he might have produced it or had some sort of involvement in that. We're returning to the world of Soderbergh here. The movie stars Marion Cotillard, Matt Damon, Lawrence Fishburne, Jude Law, Gwyneth Paltrow, Kate Winslet, Bryan Cranston, Jennifer L. Is that how you say it, Irina?
Yeah, I think so.
And Sansa Lathan. Sorry,
Close
Sansa Lathan. And when I read this cast, I was like, oh, I guess Marion Cotillard is kind of the most prominent character here. But this is the definition of an ensemble cast, where there's no real lead. I think it's a toss-up between Matt Damon, Kate Winslet, and Marion Cotillard. I would be curious to know who actually has the most screen time, though, because I feel like those are the big three.
What about
Lawrence Fishburne?
Yes.
I think he's like slightly more secondary.
Okay.
He is prominent, but I wouldn't say he's on the level of those three. Y'all think maybe?
Yeah.
Well, and Jude Law.
Yeah,
I think
I
Jude
agree.
Law's up there.
Well, he's also
true.
he's at the same level, I think, as Lawrence Fishburne.
yeah.
I think they're both at the same level because that's like one of the back burner stories.
Soderbergh's one of those directors, though. When he calls you, you're like, yes, I'll be in it. Like, cause he's just one of those directors that I feel like a lot of actors have on their list to be like, okay, I got to at least do one Soderbergh. When he calls, I'll do it. Because he's one of those prominent directors that he's always playing around with different styles and new things, and all of his movies have a level of craft to them that's impressive. I feel like even if you aren't, on the level of that movie or not enjoying it like you would. Like for me, Ocean's 11 weirdly was a movie that I didn't love as much as everyone else, but I appreciated it from afar.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of one of those filmmakers, very procedural, but also knows how to kind of insert fun. And
How would you compare him to other directors like Fincher or Villeneuve?
I kind of put him on a Fincher level, but
I was going to say Denis Villeneuve.
Soderbergh is kind of more fast and loose than a lot of directors. He knows how to churn out movies really quickly, whereas David Fincher is very methodical. And that's not to say that Soderbergh's sloppy in any way. But he could make like 2 movies in a year. Yeah. Like he's done that before, I'm pretty sure.
You were talking about like, if Soderbergh calls, you jump on that movie. I guess there are a few directors like that, but I never thought of Soderbergh in that way. But the more you look at his cast and ensembles and all his successful movies, it's almost like a sleeper
like this
director.
is almost on the verge of like a Wes Anderson, where it's like, wow, you literally have 20 names in this
Tarantino.
movie.
Yeah.
Or Tarantino. Yeah. And y'all were saying as you were watching it, like, whoa, they're in this? Whoa, they're in this? Whoa, you're in this? And sometimes they're more obscure people, like who's that guy from Galaxy Quest who's in this? He's the bald guy in this, but he was Mathazar in Galaxy Quest. I don't know what his name is.
Well,
Balthazar. Yeah.
I always remember him from...
I was like, whoa, he got this guy in this movie.
Well, it's weird to me that Bryan Cranston is in this.
I know.
For like a second, really,
Yeah,
like
2
he's
minutes
barely
or something.
there.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, what are you doing here?
It's pretty impressive, though. He's able to rally a pretty good group, and I think I don't know this for sure, but I think it's one of those cases where the directors or the actors probably take a bit of a pay cut just so they can be in a Soderbergh movie. And that happens a lot, where like sometimes you'll see and I'm not saying Soderbergh's indie, but you'll see a lot of like big name actors in like indie movies where it's like, how did this indie movie afford this actor.
I
And it's
always
usually
wondered
because
that, yeah.
an actor is more like interested in the art of it, and they just or are interested
Actually,
in the filmmaker's
Good Will Hunting's
vision.
a good sort of, because it doesn't seem like an indie
Yeah.
movie now, but when they barely got it going. They didn't have money.
I think
Yeah.
The fact that they got
Yeah.
Robin Williams in it was actually massive.
Matt
Yeah.
Damon is an interesting combination of being like a big name actor for a huge franchise, but then also you find him in some like independent films every now and then.
Well, before this, he was also working with Soderbergh in that movie, The Informant, which is
Yeah.
pretty low budget.
And before that,
Same writer as well. In what? Oh yeah, obviously
Oceans.
Ocean's 11. Yeah, yeah. I guess he is a frequent collaborator with Soderbergh. I hadn't really thought about that until now.
he's
but yeah.
I was going to say, dang it, Owen Wilson. He's the Owen Wilson for Wes Anderson.
Anyway, this movie was written by Scott Z. Burns, and I could have sworn it was also written by Steven Soderbergh, but I'm not seeing that here in the Wikipedia. But that could be all. I do have a feeling that Soderbergh had a hand in the script, so I'll just leave it at that for now. It is the sole credit here is Scott Z. Burns, but I do think there was more involvement there with Soderbergh. Anyway, for those that are new to this show, on this podcast, we first go over our thoughts on the film before revisiting it for the episode. Then we dive into the story, break it down bit by bit, and talk about the more significant moments. Then towards the end of the show, we give our brief reviews and numbered scores, along with an analysis on the health of the franchise and whether or not this film hurt it. So, Irina, had you seen Contagion before this episode?
No, I hadn't. I actually thought it came out more recently. I knew it was not during COVID or anything. But I thought it was maybe
think you
like
said
2018
yeah.
or 2017, something like that.
Like right before COVID,
Yeah.
pretty much?
But
No, yeah, 2011.
2011, which is really strange.
Yeah, predates COVID by 9 years. Yep.
I was constantly surprised by all the actors in the movie, so I clearly didn't know much about it.
Noah.
Hadn't seen it. Hadn't even heard of it. But watched it now.
Oh, you did good.
Yep.
Thankfully.
David?
I had not seen it. I had heard of it, mainly because I was working in the movie theater.
Oh. So this one hits that spot, huh?
It landed in that small window. We've covered quite a few, though, in that window. So
Yeah.
it's been a while.
Well, you worked there, how long?
3 years?
Okay, so that's a big window.
That's
not bad.
a decent window, considering we could cover all of history of movies. 3 years isn't that big.
So were the people bustling?
I don't remember. And I barely remember in theaters. I remember seeing the words, like, on the marquee, you know?
So, Contagion.
I'm pretty sure at the time I thought it was a zombie movie. Which
Contagion.
I'm surprised I didn't go see
Sounds
it.
like it would be.
Yeah.
Under any other context, a movie called Contagion would be about zombies.
Yeah, it's mostly that.
So I hadn't seen it, though. But you were cleaning up the popcorn and the trash.
I sure did. And not very much to clean up.
That doesn't seem like the movie where people will be throwing their popcorn.
No, it's not Smurfs, I'll tell you that much.
Oh, man.
Yikes.
For my part, I saw this movie at the beginning of the pandemic because there was there was a renewed interest in this movie because...
I wonder why.
Well, yeah, because it was weirdly accurate, like not exactly accurate, but a lot of the things about this movie lined up with the pandemic, so it was kind of like trending, and so I was like, okay, I should watch this thing, and I finally did, and yeah, I was, like everyone else, I was surprised by how many things were eerily similar to what we were going through, now that the pandemic's kind of waning, it's less scary. But I think what made this an intriguing watch at the time was like, what if our pandemic could get as bad as this one?
Right,
Because it was like at the
Not like
beginning
it.
of that. So it was like there was an extra creep
Yeah.
factor to watching it at that time.
Well,
I think that's why I avoided watching it. Everyone was talking about how weirdly similar Contagion was, and I'm like, no, thank you. I'm already spinning stupid stories in my mind. I don't need something else to confirm it.
Look, most people don't know this, but because we all know that Kubrick actually did the moon landing, very similarly, they actually had Soderbergh in charge of all the COVID stuff. So actually,
Yes.
to make sure that it was accurate, they made sure to go to the expert,
yes.
which is Soderbergh.
Yeah, there's a lot of footage of... no, I'm not going to make jokes about the pandemic.
Yeah,
I think
probably
mine was a
not.
good level to
Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it at. All right. With that said, David, you want to give us that call to action?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Franchise Killer. If it is your first time here, thanks for listening. Welcome. Join us. And hopefully you listen to more. For those of you who've been listening for a while, thank you so much for supporting us. And if anyone out there would like to continue or help us out in any way, you can follow us on all the major platforms. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, we have YouTube, those are all there. But the biggest thing that you can do to help us is going on Apple Podcasts and giving us a 5-star review. Leave us some comments. Let us know what you think. All 5-star reviews are read on air. So if you throw something out there, we're going to catch it and throw it right on the air. So, yeah, please help us out. I'll tell your mom.
I'll tell your mom. Cool. All right.
Thanks, Reese.
Got my back.
David, you want to pull up that Wikipedia story?
I guess.
And give it to us? I feel like you're a good go-to when there's no one else who volunteers. Anytime I try to attempt doing this story, it just falls flat on its face. And you have a good way of presenting it.
Oh, so. Thank you. Well, let me pull up that there film.
It was a groundbreaking ceremony for a new factory.
Did she mention seeing anyone who was sick? Anyone on a plane at the airport?
No, she said she was jet lagged.
The average person touches their face 3 to 5 times every waking minute. In between, we're touching doorknobs, water fountains, and each other.
Beth. Mom? No, go up to your room, honey.
So we have a virus with no treatment protocol and no vaccine at this time.
You had a seizure this morning, Beth.
She had a history of seizures,
No.
allergies.
As of last night, there were 32 cases.
Unfortunately, she did die.
Right. And he says, can I go talk to her?
Mr. Amoff, your wife is dead.
What are you talking about?
Okay.
What happened to her? What happened to her?
Is there any way someone could weaponize the bird flu? Is that what we're looking at?
Someone doesn't have to weaponize the bird flu. The birds are doing that.
Watch this. It's transmission, so we just need to know which direction.
On day 1, there were 2 people, and then 4, and then 16. In 3 months, it's 1 billion. That's where we're headed.
They're calling out the National Guard. They're moving the president underground. People will panic.
Get away!
It will tip over.
The truth is being kept from the world.
Cook your samples, destroy everything.
Returning from a Hong Kong business trip, Beth Emhoff meets her ex-boyfriend during a Chicago layover. Spoiler alerts. 2 days later, back home in suburban Minneapolis, Beth's husband, Mitch, rushes her to the hospital when she suffers a seizure. She dies from a previously unknown virus. Returning home, Mitch finds that his stepson, Clark, has also died. Mitch is isolated but found to be naturally immune. After being released, Mitch protectively keeps his teenage daughter, Jory, quarantined at home. In Atlanta, Department of Homeland Security representatives meet with Dr. Ellis Cheever of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, over concerns that the disease may be a bioweapon. Cheever dispatches Dr. Erin Mears, an epidemic intelligence service officer, to Minneapolis, where she traces everyone having had contact with Beth. She negotiates with reluctant local bureaucrats to commit resources for a public health response. Soon after, Mears becomes infected and dies. As the novel virus spreads, several cities are placed under quarantine, causing a panic buying, widespread looting, and violence. At the CDC, Dr. Ali Hextall determines the virus is a combination of genetic material from pig and bat-borne viruses. Scientists are unable to discover a cell culture to grow the newly identified MEV1. Cheever determines the virus too virulent and to be researched at multiple labs and restricts all work to one government site. Hextall orders University of California researcher Dr. Ian Sussman to destroy his samples. Believing he is close to finding a viable cell culture, Sussman violates the order and identifies a usable cell culture from which Hextall develops a vaccine. Scientists determine the virus is spread by respiratory droplets and fomites, with an R0 of 4 when the virus mutates. They project that 1 in 12 of the world population will be infected with a 25 to 30% mortality rate.
This is like Montage the movie, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's so effective in that way. Even when it's not a montage, the entire movie as you think about it, as in the ensemble way that it is a montage.
Yeah.
But we start off seeing kind of Gwyneth Paltrow's character obviously kind of under the weather with something, and the film focuses on her touching things and then other people kind of around the world getting sick, and you already know basically what's happening. And I almost want to say this, as I was watching this, with the way the score is implemented, it's almost kind of a Trent Reznor-ish score.
Oh, yeah.
It reminded me of like the pandemic version of The Social Network.
Oh.
Where as bad as that sounds,
I can see that.
where you're just seeing this virulent spread of something and how it's affecting all these people. Am I saying Facebook is a disease?
No, it's Meta.
Maybe.
Yeah. Meta, yeah, sorry. But really effective opening to this movie, and I can't help but put myself in the shoes of my earlier self when I was watching this for the first time and really grafting my thoughts of it on like what we were actually going through. But yeah, really love the opening to this movie. I think it's super effective and creepy. It does such a good job of establishing this invisible adversary in a way that, I don't know, is just slowly infecting people.
Well, I like how smooth and deliberate that Soderbergh controls the editing of this. I feel like some other weaker directors would be very heavy-handed with, oh, they're touching the thing.
Yeah.
Someone else is, they're rubbing their face.
Yeah.
And this one is very subtle. And I think that people aren't stupid, so it does...
Like, it shows it to you, obviously, but it doesn't throw
Yeah.
it in your face.
It's especially more obvious, like, since we are still in the midst of COVID and stuff like that, when they're gripping handrails or touching their face and the camera's focused on that. You know, I think it's very interesting how the ability to just touch everything and go out in public and do whatever you wanted was taken for granted, you know? We all live in this sense of safety where we're not really worried about germs. Sure, there's the flu and all sorts of things, but, like, nobody actually cared. And how many times I've watched a movie or a show where I see people walk into a bar and would just start talking with someone. I'm like, they're not wearing masks. And like for a moment, there's that thought in your head. They're like, they're not covering themselves.
Think about all the COVID that's being spit into each other's mouths.
Tell me how relatable that scene is, though, where they already know people are dying from this and they're in a line waiting for that natural medication. And then somebody coughs without a mask on and someone's like, sir, can you please? And he's like, shut the F up. And you're just like, yep, I know some people. I've heard some people like that.
Something I was telling David while we were watching it was if I were a kid that were born after COVID and I got old enough to watch this movie, I would have thought it came out because of COVID.
Yeah.
You know, like I would have thought it was influenced
yeah.
by that event, you know, because most directors and most, film crews kind of fixate on that or take advantage of like a recent event and then create a story off of it. But
Soderbergh was actually, I think, interviewed about this movie recently.
Yeah.
And he said he wasn't surprised that, COVID happened or any of that.
Anybody was.
Because he spoke with so many scientists during the making of this movie that they were like, it's not if it will happen, it's when it will happen.
Yeah.
Like a pandemic like this.
There's that Bill Gates thing that everyone always points to, like, oh, Bill Gates basically said this was going to happen. It's like, well, yeah, because a lot of intelligent people did.
Yeah.
It was a very common thing to talk about.
Yeah. And that is what I really appreciate about this movie is it is accessible to a mainstream audience in a weird way. Like, it's not... I actually kind of put it on the level of like a Gattaca, where you can teach it in schools, and it also plays
like there's
to an
science, but there's not. They're not giving you the rocket science evidence behind it.
It is weirdly palatable for a mainstream audience, and it's also very. I'm not gonna say 100% accurate,
right?
But like 90% accurate as to like how this plays out.
Can I say there's a part where they go over, I think it was Kate Winslet explaining what's it called, the R naught, where, how it spreads, how quickly it spreads to people.
Yeah.
And I felt like a student in a classroom being taught, and I felt...
Yeah, I was interested.
I know, I was like, oh, that's how that works. Thank you. Now, when's recess?
Yeah, exactly. And I watched a number... It actually made me watch a number of those videos on YouTube where it's like actual scientists watching the movie and being like, yeah, this is accurate. This
cool.
is... And most of them were like 90% accurate.
Yeah.
Like there's certain scenes that are Hollywoodized.
Yeah.
But for the most part, pretty on point.
Yeah,
kind of like
most,
Attica, honestly.
For the most part, I like with the videos I've seen of that, it's usually something where like, oh, this person wouldn't like cut this person off and then send them out of the room for something like that, or like they stepped over a line, they would have been not court-martialed, but like basically they could be arrested for doing something like that. Yeah.
So let's talk about this ensemble cast here. So we have Marion Cotillard, we have Matt Damon. I think Matt Damon's our first one. I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow's technically the first one, but she arrives back home and is with Matt Damon, who he plays Mitch. Sorry, that's not a big stretch. Matt to Mitch. Also have Lawrence Fishburne, Jude Law, and Kate Winslet. How do we feel about this cast here? Are they well represented? Are they well distinguished from one another? And do we get a good sense of who they are?
They're definitely well distinguished because you see them, and you're like, hey, that's Gwyneth Paltrow.
More like these. I'm trying. So sometimes with an ensemble, I like to feel like they differentiate themselves from one another, so they're memorable.
No,
that's
they
more
all
what I mean.
are. I would definitely say they're all memorable in their own specific way. Although Gwyneth Paltrow, I think, could have been the one person I was like, I don't think you needed to waste the budget on her in this movie.
Yeah,
I kind of like it.
I think almost the part that some of the big names play in this is, for me, it creates this sense of, oh, nobody's really safe from this. Like you see a big name actor and you're thinking, oh, they're gonna have to be around for at least like until the finale.
Yeah,
and she just dies in the very beginning.
Yeah.
Also, like I think we came over the part with Kate Winslet, right? Ellis?
I mean, yeah, we touched on her for sure.
Yeah. And she also is another surprise. But
I like the killing of Gwyneth Paltrow in the beginning and the fact that it's this big name. And as you said, Irina, it's because that establishes the stakes of this, where it's like, oh, I thought Gwyneth Paltrow would at least make it halfway through the movie.
Right.
Nope. She's like gone right there. And it sticks in your mind that, wow, Gwyneth Paltrow died. She wasn't even in this for 3 minutes.
Which is why it's funny to me that she's like a headliner name on the box.
I don't think she's top billed.
No, if you look at the cover, though, she's like right there in the middle.
Well, she's back in cutscenes and such.
Yeah.
I get you're right. She did hit a little bit more cutscenes. Although
flashback scenes, not cutscenes.
Although it was her just walking around.
Yeah.
There's also the illusion of some actors seeming like they're on screen longer when really they're not. You know? Like, I think because of the role they play, they seem like they're a little more central, but
it's all about the timing in which they appear
and
the
what the
have.
scene is specifically. So with I think the only nitpick I have is having Gwyneth Paltrow's character. I guess her name's Beth. I think her name's Beth. So Beth dies in the beginning, but it almost like it kind of takes away from it the fact that she cheated, because almost morally in your mind you think like, oh, well then that's justified sort of a thing, even though it's technically not. Nobody's death is justified by something they did, but I just it kind of pulls from that shock.
It was a weird dynamic to layer onto that. Like why did I am in agreement with you. Why did that need to be the angle that they took with her?
It like tried to incorporate some sense of drama with the Mitch character.
Yeah, where we didn't really need
Well, it
that.
just created more depressed, life for him, even though he already had a depressed life.
I have to say the most effective scene for him, like the most heart-wrenching, was when he's talking to the doctor and they said she didn't make it, and he said, oh, okay, well, can I go in and talk to her? And just kind of that, like, not even registering. Like, I just, that kind of thing hits me.
I can only imagine being a doctor, and if somebody, I'm sure that does happen on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Can you imagine where you have to repeat yourself, and you're like, don't make me do this, man.
Yeah.
And also some credit to Gwyneth Paltrow when she is seizuring on the floor. I was
good.
like, oh, that looks authentic.
Yeah.
But like her eyes just look like there's
scary.
no life behind them in that moment. It's just like fear or that there's a number of traumatizing scenes in this.
There definitely are.
But another thing that I admire about this movie is it has a lot of big names, but I don't ever get the sense that any of these players are trying to steal screen time from the other. No. It is this seems like a very collaborative movie where everyone is sharing the load, I guess, where no one is like, I'm the movie star here.
Right.
Like, it's all fairly...
I think that's because they're the star whenever they're on screen. The way it's cut together, it's very... I don't know, puzzly. They don't really mix together a lot. They when they're on screen, they are the star, and then they move to the next one, and they're the star of their scene. So it's well cut, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely not as choppy as I guess it was why am I blanking? Ocean's 12?
Oh yeah, that was real choppy.
12 was not the great one.
I remember one of our complaints was that it was just so like all of the scenes were so abrupt and choppy,
and some of them were like made sense with the movie, and others were just out of left field where it was just like
they didn't really fit in. Yeah, but here I'm not distracted too much by the cutting back and forth, and in fact it makes sense. It almost kind of, in my mind, plays like a documentary. And
it really does,
because with a documentary you would be trying to cover all the different aspects of what's going on in the situation. So you got someone that their family was directly affected, they lost people, then you would have some of the scientists working on trying to create a cure, and then those that are trying to contain, so it's I kind of liked that jumping back and forth, and I was still able to keep track of like what the progress was.
I feel like the weird beauty of this movie is it feels like it is a big inhale and exhale, and then it's over. Like you feel like you're living through this pandemic, even though and the movie feels both long and short at the same time.
Yeah, you're right.
Like you feel like you see the wave coming, and then you brace for the wave. It's hitting for the big midpoint of the movie, and then the wave leaves.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like a brief recovery, like, okay, everything's going to be okay. And that's just the movie.
Well,
like
it's
like
slow paced too, and not in a bad way. It's just like slow paced movies feel longer.
You know what's weird? I think this movie might have been more interesting to me if I hadn't just lived through COVID.
She's like, I don't want to see any more of this.
Yeah, because to me this is like, oh, I know what's going to happen next.
We saw it happen.
This is just gonna eventually fizzle. They'll get the vaccine, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and I feel like having seen it before and after, well, not before, but like during and after, it's like I see this movie weirdly as a bookend, and watching it again and seeing how this movie ends and how the pandemic now, it's not over, but how it's waning. Yeah. I almost see this movie as like mic drop. Like, that's...
Yep.
Yeah.
What happened,
Yeah.
Like it's almost more impressive.
No, they definitely did their research. They did a great job with, I think, accuracy, as y'all have said.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead. Currently in the movie, we have Kate Winslet, who's coming in. She's a Dr. Erin Mears, who's like an epidemic intelligence service officer. One of the inaccuracies of this movie is that she would have actually had a team of people with her.
Right,
she wouldn't be doing it all alone. But still, she does. The director, I feel like, wisely chose someone who feels like they could carry all of that weight on their shoulders.
Right.
As an actress, like Kate Winslet, that's such inspired casting for this. And she does such a good job, I feel like. And David, we referenced that moment where she's kind of explaining the virus to these people and how, like, contagious it is versus other viruses.
And that annoying
it kind of puts you...
lady that was just, like, constantly giving her crap.
Are you suggesting we should shut down the schools?
Yeah. But the thing is... It's so good because that's what happened.
Oh, it's exactly what happened. They're still happening.
And then we also have Jude Law, who he is basically our remdesivir, or was that the drug in COVID times where it's like, oh, this cures it?
Oh, there was a couple. There were a couple things.
Yeah,
and again,
ivermectin guy.
Well, ivermectin, and again, same thing with ivermectin. I would say forsythia is what they talked about in this.
Yeah.
And there could be a basis for how that could help somewhere, but it has not gone through the testing to get accurate results.
Yeah.
But people will claim that it is 100% going to save your freaking life.
Yeah, so he's kind of our not he's kind of the sleazeball character in a way, because he's kind
just
of
annoying.
Because maybe this is effective for him, but he's
Yeah.
spreading misinformation that's not like checked.
Yeah. But I
He's
think
the Alex
because
Jones of
he
this
gets
movie.
to, I think he gets to a point where a lot of people in his position, their intent starts to shift as they realize how much power they have, where they almost start to be more interested in sensationalizing than actually helping.
And they're like, look at what I knew.
Yeah, look at what I knew,
before
look
everyone
what I
else."
did, and this
I
is
was
the
the
way
one
to
that
do it,
saved
and they're
everyone.
lying. They just make like these blanket statements, and I think
Yeah, he has that not YouTube
Yeah.
channel, but he has like his
own
website
channel,
or whatever,
yeah.
where he's like, I'm taking this. I'm
Yeah.
definitely sick with it, and if
Yeah.
I am alive tomorrow, it means it worked or
Yeah.
whatever.
And I could imagine how someone who's been, brushed off as sort of a quack and nobody really believes them, once they do have like that hold on people, they're just like, all right, now I can just unleash it all and everyone's going to actually listen to me.
Yeah.
But I commend him as an actor because this is a movie where I never thought I would want to punch Jude Law in the face, but something about that tooth, that they knew how to make him look punchable, and he knew how to act punchable.
So we also have Marion Cotillard as Dr. Leonora Orantes. She's the epidemiologist with the World Health Organization. I get a little muddy about like what her character is doing here.
That was I agree. Whenever it went to her story, I just was like, wait, what?
Yeah, I found
this
her...
is part of the
You're an
narrative?
Inception.
Yeah, I found her plot line to be a little less interesting. Especially when she gets kidnapped and she has to spend all her time with these people who like, oh, this is the entire village or what's left of it.
Chinese village where she kind of teaches the children.
Yeah, that's the weak part of the movie in my opinion. Anytime we cut to her and it's
like, I know she was being held hostage so that they could bring the vaccine there when there was one, or so they could force some help with the village that would be ignored.
I also think that, weird enough as it is, Matt Damon's role is kind of lackluster.
I was pretty invested.
Him.
I was pretty invested in his
Well, you can
his
be,
stuff.
but what's his real purpose in the movie?
It's almost like an audience.
No,
surrogate
he's
going
he's the
through-
ground level. They're trying to show people on
He's
all
not
sides
the
of
ground
this.
level.
No,
He's immune.
No, he's the civilian though. Yeah, he's important in a way. Yes, because he's immune. But he's also
daughter's
showing
not
the effect on like in his bubble. He has people who have died and people he's trying to protect, and I find the tension of that interesting and more identifiable from my perspective.
Well, but then they went and took it away from him and went to other things. Like, went to other characters.
Well, yeah, because
That's
it's
a
an
Soderbergh
ensemble movie.
Yeah, it's an ensemble movie, but they, like, didn't really stick with each
So I see what you're saying. It doesn't
one.
connect to the other, where all the other main characters have this sort of tie-in.
Well, it
He's
does in the
kind of
sense
off
that
on
he
his own.
is not affected by the virus.
And they did use that, didn't they? At some point, like they brought that up.
Yeah. And he's also the reason that he has a quote at one point where he's like, oh, well, if I'm immune, why can't you use my blood to cure it? And then that's a way for them to explain like why it doesn't exactly work.
Which
that
is
way.
funny because people probably asked that during coronavirus.
Yeah, exactly.
too.
Yeah. No, I think Matt Damon's one of the stronger parts of this.
No, he does a good job. The point
It's the
is that it's
connection.
it's not connected enough to the actual story that they're telling.
Well, he directly connects with Kate Winslet's character as well. She has to directly interact with him because...
No, that's not what I'm saying. His story doesn't matter in the scheme of the movie.
I think they all do, though.
It's
just
the only reason being that his wife is the origin of the virus.
Yeah, if they had stuck with just him throughout the whole movie, and then like he's just observing all of everything, that would be one thing. Then it would be his story. But instead, they start with him, and that's the origin of the virus, and then they go on to Lawrence Fishburne. They go on to the others. They go on to the others. I'm not upset about it.
I think it works, and only because of the fact that I think it helps ground the movie, and also like when you're just around people who are doing sciencey things, you need somebody who is at home, somebody who is actually living through it, that isn't just trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, and also what's so interesting about him
we
is
all
you
lived
see
through that.
how what is interesting about his character is he has put his foot in both sides of the world where it's like he has his foot kind of in this side with the scientists who have kind of explained what's happening to him, and he was literally directly related with patient 0 or the index patient or whoever Gwyneth Paltrow was in this case. And also he's having to impress that upon his daughter, and you see some of that paranoia on his side about like, okay, you cannot touch anybody. I liked all of that stuff.
I know people who were like that at the beginning of the COVID.
I would have thought that
situation.
story would have been more interesting if it were the point of the movie, but they made it not the point.
Well,
of
it's
the
kind of
movie.
hard to do both because they wanted the science-y sort of part. To
I
be
know,
the main
that's what I'm
thing.
saying.
It's a weird bone to pick. Like, I think it's
No, I wasn't making it a big bone to pick, but I had to defend
But
myself.
yeah, now we're talking about it. Yeah.
I was just saying I wish his role was stronger.
And I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But as I said, I don't think this movie is dealing with anything that's supposed to be turned up to 11. Like all these characters are part of the puzzle, as we were saying earlier. Like who was saying you were saying it was like a puzzle, or
no,
I did. Or you were saying it. Yeah, that's right. And that's what it is. Like no one part in this movie is strong enough to carry the movie. It is all. I don't know. It's
Kate Winslet could have carried this movie.
Yeah, I mean, yes, she could have.
She did
if that
for
was a different movie.
Portion of it.
Yeah, that caught me off guard. By the way, when she died, I was like, oh, I thought she was going to be like the main carry.
And we should talk about her before we continue on, because I think she dominates the first half of this movie before she
for sure
passes away. She's like the one who is kind of just spearheading this effort to try and figure out, for one, what this thing is and how to stop it, along with Cheever, who's played by Lawrence Fishburne, who I also really like in this
Always
movie.
good to see him in something.
Yeah, he's great.
He sells that role very well. Like, I can see him in that position.
Mentorial.
Yeah.
Man, it's so funny that we do a disaster miniseries, and that's when we end up covering 2 Kate Winslet movies.
Yeah,
I know,
almost
right?
nearly back to back.
Yeah, almost back to back. And I don't think we've had Kate Winslet on any of our episodes before this, which is just weird. So, but it's cool seeing her, I don't know, just totally in control of every scene that she's in. I don't know, but not in a showboaty type of way. She just seems like she embodies the professionalism of a character like this. And apparently, too, we're watching the movie right now, but they're setting up the hospital in this gym or something. Apparently, that's super accurate as well.
You need something large enough, a stadium or something where you can actually get units that you can have lots of doctors at, where you can isolate people. And of course, the main concern was, whose budget is this coming out of? And you're like, people are dying, Karen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like actually the passing of the torch from character to character. So like I really like Kate Winslet. Unfortunately, she dies, but I think that's a good time to move on to another set of characters, which does lead me back to Matt Damon. Or I think they should have just dropped him entirely at the beginning after Patient Zero, and then looped it back at the end.
Oh, like kind of tied it back in.
Yeah, so not continuously touching base with him, but having him be another one of those characters that's like, oh, the virus affected this one in this way, this is his part.
Well, you know who
cut him off.
There's 2 characters, I think, that combine all the way through from the beginning to the end. 3 if you include Jude Law. Matt Damon's character and Lawrence Fishburne's character. Because I think Lawrence Fishburne's character, I mean, he's subtly underneath the surface the whole time. I would say he's arguably one of the top main characters because of that.
Yeah.
Kind of drives the plot along.
It's nice to see him in this movie too. Like I actually really like his character. He's like a big picture type of person, but also he has these personal relationships with, I guess, slightly lower class people, like he does with the janitor.
Yeah.
Like he obviously cares about that guy. He's willing to kind of,
That was touching, by the way.
Yeah,
I thought
help
that was
him out.
really sweet.
Yeah, and he has this one moment where he is looking after his own more so than anyone else, and that moment
Which is
of guilt.
real. I feel like a lot of people would do that.
But then he also ends up helping him out in the end, and that's in the second half. But still, it's Finally, let's talk about Jennifer L., who kind of has a semi-substantial role in this. Irina, you know her from Pride and Prejudice?
Not that
Oh
important.
yeah, the BBC Pride and Prejudice. She played Elizabeth.
Yeah, she is. She plays Dr. Allie Hextall. I'm reading this off of Wikipedia. A research scientist with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Wait, and you know who played alongside her, right?
Dimitri Martin.
Dimitri freaking Martin. You see that big nose and you're like, what? What are you doing
when
here?
we saw him, we both just looked at each other like, what?
He's been in like 2, maybe 3 movies tops, right? Like
such a random.
He was in Woodstock, that Woodstock movie, I think. But other than that, he's just like known for his stand-up. So just seeing him in such a serious role.
I mean, it's kind of
as
cool.
a scientist of all things, and like, oh, I like seeing him though.
Yeah, just want to say that I just like seeing her in this, and she also does a good job in this movie.
Her role is very interesting too. She plays she comes across as very eccentric, you know, and very focused on her work. Doesn't really have like a personal life outside of you know, the lab or something, and she pulls it off. It definitely seems like someone that would stab themselves with their
own vaccine.
You know, their own vaccine.
Call that ballsy.
Yeah.
Call that dangerous.
She's almost like, in my mind, kind of Data-like, you know? Like, they kind of look at you with a certain kind of wide-eyed, like, I'm only focused on this one subject and knowledge.
We talking Star Trek Data here? We talking old school?
David?
Should I move on with that plot?
You want to close out that story?
I'm going to close out that story. Hextall inoculates herself with the experimental vaccine, then visits her infected father. She does not contract MEV1, and the vaccine is declared a success. Yay! The CDC awards vaccinations by lottery based on birth dates. By this time, the pandemic's death toll has reached 2.5 million in the US and 26 million worldwide. Earlier in Hong Kong, World Health Organization epidemiologist Dr. Leonora Orantes and public health official comb through the security tapes of Beth's contacts in Macau casino and identify her as the index case. Government official Sun Fang kidnaps Orantes as leverage to obtain a vaccine for his village. World Health Organization officials provide the village with the earliest vaccines, and she is released. When she learns the vaccines were placebos, she goes to warn the village. Mitch stages... Okay, we go from like all of this, and it goes straight into Mitch stages prom at home for Jory as life returns to normal.
Yep.
All right. In a flashback... To the spillover event, a bulldozer from M. Hoff's company clears rainforests in China, disturbing bats. One bat finds a shelter in a pig farm and drops an infected piece of a banana that is then consumed by a pig. The pig is then slaughtered, prepared by a chef in Macau casino, who, without washing his hands, transmits the virus to Beth via handshake.
Yeah.
Dun dun dun.
So there's definitely things we didn't talk about that we already went over in the past story portion. Namely, Kate Winslet's death. I think that scene where you see someone, the silhouette of someone who is a woman coughing in their bed, you're like, oh, who is it?
Yeah.
It's probably Kate Winslet, but still I'm like...
Yeah, you're like, who is it?
And you just know, like, oh, they're marked for death. Anytime someone coughs in this movie, you know they're marked for death.
Well, even when... Well, it almost seemed like they were hyping it up so much, I was like, okay, she's going to get real sick, but she'll survive. I was incorrect. When you see her in her hotel room and she's calling people and like, okay, so they're building it up. Maybe the Lawrence Fishburne will get in there and save her or something. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you
get in there and save her.
I don't know. Get in there and save her. Breathe life into her. And the next thing you see her in a body bag on the ground. And you're like, oh, snap.
What a shot, too. Just seeing like a dead looking Kate Winslet in a body bag.
Yeah. Especially
Justice
since she
for
was...
Jack. I'm just kidding.
Wow.
That was
next
awful.
I think Leonardo DiCaprio standing there going, yeah.
I think especially since she was such a powerful force for a while that, you know, it almost seemed impenetrable. I think in that scene I was hoping, oh, maybe it's just like the one time it's a common cold, or she just, you know, like because she hasn't been eating well or whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
Stuff. And it's just supposed to spook me, you know, and then she dies, and you're like, oh,
it's actually one of the connections we got to make from even just COVID. It's like you can still get other things other than COVID, but every symptom ties into COVID. So you're like, am I dying? Or do I just have a cold?
I think one of the things that kind of pulled me out of this was, and maybe they just wouldn't be able to anticipate this, but the lack of people actually trying to social distance or using masks or things like that. I think there were some mask usages, but there's one part where Lawrence Fishburne's character is being interviewed at that, and he's even talking about oh, we've learned that social distancing and wearing a mask is like helping prevent, but there isn't really much in the way of trying to enforce that, and people are constantly going out to eat and stuff, and I think that's the only thing that kind of pulled me out of the realistic situation.
My only defense would be that this disease seems to spread a lot quicker, so maybe it hasn't completely hit the mainstream that, oh, you gotta do this.
Yeah.
But
well, with a mortality rate that high, one of the things to me that was weird was that they didn't just immediately lock down. And again, it could be the fact that we lived through it, so we're like, oh, we locked down like the second a single case hit Austin, we were closed. Like I remember the day it shut down.
It wasn't immediate.
No, it wasn't, but I remember when it happened. It was pretty quick. I mean, that was before it blew up.
Yeah.
And that was, what, March of 2020?
March something.
Yeah, whereas this movie, it took months and months of people dying. And you're like, yeah, it would have closed down.
It actually wasn't months and months. I believe this movie takes place over at least like 1 or 2 months.
Holy cow. I thought it was like 6 months.
No, this movie, it posits a disease that spreads like rapid fire.
Even more reason that getting a vaccine out would never have happened that quickly.
But still, like, we've never dealt with something like this in our generation. The fact that the movie at least identified social distancing as something effective, I still find impressive. Yeah. Like, it's so easy to criticize this for the things that aren't exactly like how we
I think it was mostly with officials that it bothered me. Like, the regular people didn't, but those that are working on the virus and you didn't see them like taking any precautions when they go out in public was weird.
Yeah, they did. They showed Kate Winslet like throwing a mask on and like trying to save people.
They do once, but then they also show them all in public areas with new people and there's no consideration.
Lawrence Fishburne doing his thing. He didn't have a mask on.
Part of me wonders if it is like these are big name actors, we need their full face on the screen kind of a thing. Like that could be part of it too. Yeah. But anyway, it's like a very small thing to nitpick, but it's just something that took me out of it being, having experienced COVID and never watched this movie before.
We're all experienced now.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's weird though, right?
It's hard not to use it.
I kind of see this movie as it has to show a virus at an accelerated pace because it's a movie. It's not a TV series.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's got to show that
and everything resolves
like
faster.
how it happens.
Yeah,
it's on fast forward for sure. But I think it does a really good job of just covering all of the bases.
Yeah,
there's certainly weaknesses to it, and I think the weakness to this movie is just not being invested at all in what Marion Cotillard's character is going through.
Right.
Like, for me, that's just, like, where I'm like, okay, skip ahead. I don't care.
Yeah.
What is even... This is maybe... I mean, a fault on my part, but I barely know what she's doing here with these... when she's being taken hostage. Like, it's something about they want the vaccines. I know that. But I'm still just kind of... just totally lose interest in any of all of that stuff.
To me, she seems to be operating on more of a, not corporate level, but sort of distanced from those with like boots on the ground taking care of things. She's more like a numbers person.
Yeah.
And so her character comes off as a little like callous because of that.
I'll just say that's when I yawn when watching this movie. Like, oh, we're with her character.
Well, I think it would have been interesting if they focused a little more time on her actually being in the village, because obviously there's a change where she seems distanced from the situation.
Yeah,
and then later she's concerned for them because they only got a placebo, so she developed some connection. But we were completely left out of that entire story.
I guess the point of her character is to connect her, I don't know, their operation with the ground level.
Yeah.
Like, so that there's actually a connection there instead of, just being on the, I guess, more business side of it. Where it's like, no, here's the human connection to, like, what you're doing.
Well, also just the... we often have this disconnection between other countries and like their people, or we associate other countries' people with their government.
Yeah. Rather than them just being people living out their lives. Yeah.
And the people just in that village or whatever are actually suffering at the hands of their own government.
Yeah.
And maybe this is kind of a, hey, these are people too that need help, and they're not like the ones that caused the virus.
I actually really
they're just affected by it.
Liked
as
the
well.
character Sun Fang, the guy that
Oh,
actually
yeah.
took her, because I think even though his character was so small and you didn't get to see much of him, it was definitely conveying that difficult spot of working for this administration and trying to help, but then also having personal ties with a group of people that you know are going to be sidelined and they're going to be last in line to get these vaccines. So I wish, again, just more was focused on that story just a little more. I think she could have been the good one to pick up where Winslet left off, because I think Kate Winslet's performance was very moving to me, because she operated on a sacrificial level, you know, and so there was something very human about it. I think there needs to be more human elements, not just Mitch and his daughter.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I liked that fine, but I wish I had more of her, you know, and what she was doing.
Yeah, me too. I agree.
I also think this movie is missing at least like 15 to 20 minutes in the middle of just like people dealing with the pandemic.
Right.
It's very in and out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Have the people that are actually enjoying the quarantine.
I'm more saying like I want to see
at home.
Exactly.
And maybe this is bad, but I want to see more of the, I don't know, the ravaging of the world that this pandemic is doing.
And it did a little bit of
it does a
it,
little,
yeah.
Like there's people throwing bodies in ditches and stuff, and that's really
stealing things from stores and all that. Yeah.
But that section doesn't really last long enough, so it makes the threat of the pandemic a little bit diminished, even though it's still, devastating.
If they don't show at least like 20 people in a Walmart trying to get as much toilet paper as possible, is this actually an accurate movie?
I know, right? Okay, so how do we feel about how Alan Jude Law's character, the resolution of his story?
I like it.
Yeah, go into it. Let's hear it.
The fact that he is such an annoying character, whether or not you agree with him in real life or not, because there are people like that. But it's
I really hate that exchange with him and Lawrence Fishburne
Whether
over
or
on
not.
Oh, that was
on air.
hard to
It was
watch.
just like, ugh. Yeah.
Yeah, or I just like the part in the park where he kind of showed the fact that he was finally going in for the money and security rather than actually telling the truth.
Yeah.
Because whether or not he was telling the truth or not, he thought he was, which is dangerous, especially when you could be spreading very, very false information.
Yeah, misinformation.
But then he gets tackled in the park by, tons
Whether
of people.
or not.
That's fine. He tried.
I'm not a public speaker.
He tried.
I'm here to put podcast words.
These are podcast words, or not.
I'm David, and I approve this message.
David and I approve this. Love it. But yeah, so like the resolution of his character, Matt Damon, or Mitch, sorry. Surprised I remembered that.
Mitch Damon.
He's holed up with his daughter, who he's trying to protect her at all costs from her boyfriend, who keeps trying to...
When you say it like that, tries to protect her from her boyfriend at all costs.
Oh, you know what I mean. He's like trying to make romantic gestures to her, but he's not allowing the contact. She finally sneaks out, and they're like making snow angels or whatever, and he gets really upset. Fast forward, he finally gets his vaccine, and it's happy endings. There's this whole lottery for vaccines or whatever. They don't get it, but he's got it, so they're good. Happy ending there. I kind of liked that as a nice little button on the end of the movie.
Oh, man, the fact that they had that prom night and he set it up for her secretly.
Yeah.
And then he has his moment in the closet where he looks at photos of his wife.
Yeah.
That
I'm just getting the camera.
it's like it doesn't help the plot, but man, it hurt me in the heart.
It kind of did. Like it was like, oh, this movie isn't completely cold. And I actually kind of cared about.
It was sad.
Yeah.
That was actually the first moment for me that I actually believed Matt Damon as an emotional character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because throughout the movie, I didn't really see him as caring that much that they had died until
Irene and I talked about this.
Except at the beginning when he's in disbelief about his wife being
Hold on.
dead.
Irene and I talked
disbelief.
about this.
Yeah, but
whenever you're in a intense situation like that, your body goes into like a numbness state where you don't even show emotion.
That's shock.
Yeah, I think he was in shock for a long period of time.
He was in shock, but then he was also in survival mode because he doesn't know what's happening, and he has a daughter. So he's like, my priority is my daughter right now. I need to focus on this. I can't show emotion.
I have to focus.
So once there was a moment of release of that tension where everything's starting to feel normal again, it's almost like your brain allows you to express what you've been basically putting on the back burner for so long.
It just didn't feel like it was a shock type thing or he was out of his mind. He seemed like completely calm and collected.
I don't think he was out of his mind. I just think
no. But like when someone's in shock, like they almost disassociate. And that's not what it looked like. It looked more like he was just like, okay, well, I guess I better do this for my daughter.
I don't know.
Instead of
he did have the crazed disbelief in the beginning, and then it was later that he kind of
yes, but
out.
more. It's less to do with his wife, more to do with I guess his stepson.
He seemed pretty freaked out about that, in my opinion.
Really?
Yeah,
he didn't seem that freaked out.
I think what also.
What was his stepson? Not
creates
blood.
Yeah, but
I mean, he handled it appropriately.
What also creates a problem is that the sequence of events were constantly jumping between their story and other people's stories. So I do agree with you. It felt like you kind of just forget that he lost a wife and stepson, I guess.
Yeah.
And you're mostly just focused on him with his daughter. But I think the daughter is supposed to be expressing to you what he's not able to because of his circumstance. Like, he doesn't have the luxury of grief at the moment. Like, he has to be focused on survival. Whereas she's just kind of, like, not really knowing how to cope. She's having emotional swings. So, like, I think she's sort of supposed to convey that to you, because if it's just him acting like that, then you wouldn't really believe anything that's happening. But I actually liked their dynamic, because
I did too.
I'm so used to daughters in films like this being like, "Oh, Dad, you're so unreasonable. I hate you." You know, and like
I'll slam the door.
Yeah.
And she did express like moodiness and kind of being upset.
She definitely was more realistic.
But she was more realistic about it. Like she
understood.
On some level, she understood, but she was also more like, without saying words, she was all like, "I hate my life right now."
And even when she would talk with her boyfriend over the phone, like the way she would refer to her father is like not like "I hate him,"
right?
More just like I disagree with him, but I still respect his decision.
Yeah.
Well, even the boyfriend, I thought, respected the dad pretty well. Even though he went, no, hold on. I think he was trying. It's realistic, because at that age, boys would sneak around trying to get to their girlfriend.
Yeah.
But when he got in trouble, he didn't try to like backtalk. He was like, "I'm out."
Yeah.
He's like, all right.
He's like,
all right,
okay.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go away.
It would have been so easy for this movie to take the low road and be like, "Oh, the boyfriend's gonna go for another girl now."
There's all sorts of things they could have done.
Like hit her dad, and he has to just stand there and take her hitting him. Like
I don't know about
see in
that.
so many. No, there's scenes where like the daughter like is just like punching the dad's like body or whatever.
Dad,
like,
no, I love him.
Things like that. Like it.
Like, she's obviously disappointed, but she's still, like, yielding to what's happening. Yeah.
I do feel like, though that was better than the other things, think that she would be, like, 100% behind him, like, no matter what, based on the circumstances. Hey, my dad was quarantined by the government.
Yeah.
His wife died. Her child died by this disease that's killing millions and millions of people. You think you're gonna want to stay in,
and that's why I think she did.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, probably move on.
I think we're like losing focus though. The main character in this movie is the pandemic in a weird way.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Where like that is everything. That is the nucleus, and everything else is revolving around this.
That's
the
next
fact that
level,
we have
man.
tastes of all these characters reacting to this on different sides, I find that more interesting. Like I like that I know, like, none of these characters alone are fully developed,
right?
But you get a little sense of their lives and what they have to do. And I like that about this movie. And it's all revolving around this pandemic.
Yeah.
And the fact that we at least get a sense of who Mitch's character is and his relationship with his daughter.
Right.
Or who all these other characters are and, like, their relationships with one another and their jobs. I think it's so effective, and this movie's so good at juggling all of these pieces.
Yeah.
And just making them fit together. Like I'm just like kind of surprised that it's able to do it and how short this runtime is. How it really does show the whole front to back pandemic and everyone dealing with it. Like
speaking of the pandemic as like the central character brought to mind the fact that I found myself almost treating it like a monster or the ghost or the whatever.
Well, you never forget about it in any scene.
You start to
follows.
after a while, like when you're watching a horror movie, you'll be looking like, oh, is it behind that door? Is it like in that closet? In this, I'm like,
you're just waiting for somebody to cough.
You're waiting for someone to cough, but also the camera pans over things where you're all like, is the germ like on that tea set that she just grabbed, or is the germ like
everything
on that
feels
bar they just ate?
It just lingers on items.
Yeah, you're like,
is
it here? Like, is it there? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And there's some shots though that emphasize like how dirty things are.
Yeah.
This scene with the guy early on who he's coughing in the bus. Like I looked at the window on the bus and it's so like smudged up from like people touching it or putting their heads against it, and you're just thinking about it like, oh, there's that 50 million people have touched that. Like this whole movie, you're like, people have touched everything in this movie.
And then
fomites,
the people,
those are the fomites that they talk about.
And then the people that quote unquote clean it just like do a slight little like, all right.
Oh yeah, like the guy in the bar who's like wiping down the cups, and then he like yawns into his hand, and then he starts like wiping it down some more.
Do a little spit shine there, maybe make it look like it's more clean, but it's not really clean.
Yeah. So by the end, the virus is mostly taken care of. It seems like we don't get an actual definitive, like it's gone. But you get the sense that the world has kind of, for the most part, dealt with it. We're still probably dealing with the residuals of everything. Then we do get our flashback scene where we see how it originally spread to Gwyneth Paltrow's character. And that's basically just them saying that history will repeat itself. This is going to happen again.
Yeah.
Like that's it, and it's this easy. It's going to pass from something to something else, and then next pandemic.
Which brings you to the point of like, what was the point of there having been an affair? Why is that even in this?
Zero.
What's the point?
To make you feel bad for Matt Damon's character. That's it.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying this movie's perfect. There's certain things that I think, like, oh, I don't know why they really needed to do that. Other than to be like, hey, this is real life and affairs happen in real life. But, again, from a narrative standpoint, I don't really see the sense in it to kind of degrade her character before she dies.
Yeah.
I think it also adds to that scene where Kate Winslet has to basically confirm that she was cheating on him, just to make that scene more awkward, where it's like, hey, your wife's dead and also she was cheating on you. And later it's kind of funny in that scene afterwards where she's telling Cheever, Lawrence Fishburne's character, like, how do you think I'm feeling? I just had to tell a man that his his dead wife was cheating on him. Like it's like that was kind of darkly funny.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of levity in this movie. There's very little levity.
No.
Okay, there's not a lot of levity, but I personally was never really that sad about anything.
And I wasn't either, and that's because you're not really
connected.
The emotional connection to all these characters is spread pretty evenly across all of them, and it's like a minimal emotional connection to most of these characters. I would say the characters that I felt some modicum of feeling towards are Lawrence Fishburne's character, Kate Winslet character, Matt Damon. Past that, not really any of them.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all feel the same way.
Yeah, I'm kind of there with you.
Yeah. I honestly think that this movie should have focused more on what's her name, Jennifer L.
Oh, interesting.
I liked her too.
She was the one that created the vaccine. I think they could have made her the main.
Although
character.
she was. I thought she was one of the least important ones, really.
She is the one that literally saved millions.
I know, and I like that part, but like, you can't focus on her the whole time.
I like it
as
like
a group effort.
I like it as a completely even ensemble where it's like
no. Here's y'all are mistaking what I'm saying. what I'm saying is not that she's the main character the whole time. I like the way they do the narrative, but have her take the place of Matt Damon instead as like the audience surrogate, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
She's not really much of an audience surrogate.
Any character can be an audience surrogate.
I think
you don't see me trying to be the guy from Clash of whatever.
Not every movie needs a specific audience surrogate. I think it's realistic movies that need an audience surrogate. So like this one being like the everyday man. But
I think this movie is sharing the load equally between all of them.
I don't know.
Showing that it is a group effort to combat this
If
thing.
there's one thing that I think Noah and I can agree on, it's that it could have been done better. I think there are ways that this movie could have been done better.
Well, I'll fight you.
We'll talk about it then. We'll get to
Why
that
don't you
at the
go call up Steven Soderbergh and give him your tips?
Here's what I'd say.
For how
this movie never offends me, but it also doesn't really do anything for me that I'm like, oh, I really liked that.
All right. I think that's a good enough closing on this that we can take a quick break and we will get into our reviews and we're going to hash this thing out. So we'll see y'all then. Welcome back. Let's talk Contagion.
Contagion.
David, you got our scores there in the bowl. You want to pull them at random?
Yes, I do. Oh, look, I'm starting us off. And we'll see where I land in regards to everybody else, but I am starting us off with a 7.5.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I thought it's a good score. I also could see why somebody would put this significantly higher. There's something about this movie where it's well made. But
before you go into that, I think it's about how you feel when you watch it.
And my energy while I'm I watched it, I was like, this is a well-made movie that does not make me want to revisit it.
Yeah.
I didn't really, I even struggling to say I enjoyed my time. I had enjoyment because I was drawing parallels to COVID. Mm-hmm. But it's not my favorite movie. And I love seeing a lot of these actors. Maybe that's how they got the energy going. Mm-hmm. Because with all this dryness, all this death, you kind of need some characters that people can watch go, oh, I like this guy who carries it through. And they do. Again, I could see people liking this even more than what I gave it. But for me, the energy level is 7.5. So yeah, 7.5 seems fair. It's a really good movie. It's just not for me, really. So 7.5.
Your sevens do go a long way.
It's better than Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, okay? It is.
That is true.
By only half a point.
Which is saying something, because there are definitely no Yetis playing football to be seen in this movie.
Hot take, Reese. I think that movie is more rewatchable than this one.
I agree.
I disagree.
I think even though it's dumber and a worse movie, it's definitely not as good as this.
Rewatchability does not equate good movie.
I'm just saying, I would rather watch Brendan Fraser go to China and play with Yetis than watch this really depressing movie.
Play football with Yetis.
Football with Yetis. That's right. And watch Jet Li fondle balls. Anyway,
fair enough.
Next up is Reese with an 8.5.
Wow. Yeah, and it deserves it.
I don't disagree.
Look, it is hard to find something that is egregiously wrong with this movie. I think this is one of those few movies where it's kind of how you feel about it. Mm-hmm. Like, you watch it,
I'll agree with that.
What did you get out of it? What did you not get out of it? Like,
yeah.
Because everything that's in it, every scene, is so methodically well crafted, and it has a mission, and it accomplishes that, and it does it through this ensemble cast. It all depends on the type of movie you want, and for me, this had all of the pieces that I wanted. Sure, there's certain elements of it, about it that I didn't enjoy as much, particularly the Marion Cotillard stuff, and that's why I kind of ding it points. Anytime it cuts over to her, I just kind of lose interest. But what I think carries this movie through is this like underlying sinister pandemic that is very similar to what we faced, where it's like a constant unseen villain throughout this movie, and how all of the characters who are from different backgrounds react to it is what makes this movie fascinating and very interesting to me. I also love how unconventionally paced it is, and I referenced it earlier, it is like this incoming tidal wave that everyone is kind of bracing for. They don't have enough time to deal with it, but they have to brace for it. It comes, it hits, and then it wanes, and then it just feels so... All the scenes just naturally flow into the other, and it just like really does a good job of getting a really good perspective of all sides of everyone dealing with this pandemic. And I just really think it's like expertly done. Like I really do like this movie. And that's the reason I don't have it in the 9s or 10 region, is because it's not a landmark epic, I don't know,
it's
huge
not as fun.
accomplishment, but it is what it seeks out to do. It does perfectly.
Can you
in
think
my
of
opinion.
like another movie where it's so well done, but it just doesn't draw the right energy? Like, I don't know, because it is well made. There's no doubting that.
We have a number that we've covered. I can't think of them off the top
I feel
of my
like
head.
Gattaca is a more effective version of this movie.
I agree.
Yeah,
as far as like,
I like Gattaca better. I rated it higher, but I think this movie is no slouch at all. I think it's very impressive what it's able to do, and I think it's easy to shortchange it because you don't have like a main character leading the way, like carrying the plot through. But I think it's just it's a movie you kind of need to alter your viewpoint of to understand why it's so successful. So I will leave it at that, 8.5.
Okay. Next up, Irina with a surprising 7.
7.
I think I'll do like 7.5 instead. I had just put it there because I wasn't entirely sure. Last time I saw the movie was a couple days ago, so I don't know, it had been kind of forgotten. I think that's one of the big factors for me, is that it just sort of, and maybe because of experiencing the pandemic right now, it just kind of seems to get washed away with all the other things I watch. There isn't anything in my mind that particularly stands out about it. It feels, like I said before, almost more documentary-like, which is cool, and I'm impressed by it. Like, obviously, I gave this a good score. But there are little things that I think I would have tweaked. I would have liked to have more of a central story with some of these characters. I think, what was her name? Cortezia? What was it? The Marie...
Leonora Orantes.
Okay.
Cortesia, not quite.
Yeah, I don't know where I got Cortez. I don't know where I got that. I would have liked to see more of her character and her interaction. I've brought that up before. There are some plots that almost seem to be just dropped and then kind of resolved quickly, but again, they're biting off a lot, and he's been able to create a fluent story here that you can understand and not choppy the way I usually kind of criticize his work for being. Lots of strong characters. I just wish there was more of them, like a little more time with them. So I'll leave it there.
Fair enough. Got one more.
All
and
right.
I think it will be the lowest score.
And last but not least, we have Noah with a 6.
That is, oh my gosh. Okay, go
Say
ahead.
what you will. I thought this movie was kind of boring.
Wow.
Yeah, accurate or not.
I thought it was kind of boring. I didn't really care too much for the characters.
Sky.
Some plots were unresolved, seemingly, to me at least. There was a little bit of fluff as far as, affair goes, and there are aspects of it that could be really cool if I cared more about them. But ultimately, I just didn't really vibe with it. I don't know. I think it might be in part due to the fact that, we lived through a pandemic, and it was like, I'm not saying our pandemic was as severe as this one because the death toll was very high in this one, but I just didn't really feel the stakes of this one.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Hey, sometimes movies don't hit the same.
I don't know.
Reese.
I just, I felt like, oh, if someone dies here, that will make it more interesting for me. And then they didn't really.
Hey,
They killed
a couple
multiple
people.
They only killed Kate Winslet.
Gwyneth Paltrow.
And Gwyneth Paltrow.
No, but she died at the beginning. That was like the beginning of the movie. Then after
Her
that,
son.
after that though, like I don't know, like
They
whenever
also
Kate
they
Winslet
killed that pregnant lady. What's her name? Who was trying to get the forsythia from?
she wasn't a character.
She was.
No, she wasn't.
Yeah, she kind of was, but not really. She was just sort of related to the crazy dude or whatever.
Matt Damon, I didn't really believe his grief up until the end. The end, I thought he sold it really well.
Yeah.
So you don't think 6 is ever so slightly harsh on this?
Not really. I think it's a well-made movie. I
think it's slightly harsh.
Really have that's fine. You can think that. It's a subjective matter.
I think I'm going to move mine to 8 then.
How dare you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm usually when I rate films, it's because like were they able to convey what they wanted to, and I think that is fair for this, especially when I'm thinking about this director's work beforehand. I'm not like the biggest fan of the Ocean's series. I think they're fun, but I don't know, it just doesn't really get to me. And I think this, at least for me, subject wise, is more interesting. I'm moving mine to 8.
Nice.
If I felt the horror of the disease more, I think I might have liked it a lot better.
They literally threw
I'm
Kate
factoring
Winslet's
in-
body in a body bag into a ditch.
I'm also factoring in that we are, in the midst of COVID right now, and I think like something like this, having seen it for the first time during COVID, it probably doesn't land in the same way as, maybe if I had seen it beforehand or a while after, so I think just because we're so used to all that news, it just kind of feels like white noise at this point.
Yeah, and you have to understand 9 years before COVID.
Yeah,
even
they
happened.
did a great job. Like they get some good points for accuracy.
Oh yeah.
I just think it's so, I don't know, uncanny how close.
I'm more just thinking of it on a narrative level. I'm just not in love with it.
All right.
Gotcha.
David, you able to average those scores for us?
We have an average of 7.5.
7.5?
Yep.
All right.
Which puts us, there's a large tie in the 7.5 range with Hellboy, Blade, Silver Bullet, and Contagion now.
Which Hellboy?
First Hellboy.
The first Hellboy.
Yeah, OG Hellboy, not the new one.
Oh, Hellboy is
It's better.
really good.
Yeah, see, I wonder
Hellboy
where
is
did that
really good.
I agree. I don't know where that one fell, but it's there.
I believe when we watched Hellboy, we were kind of starstruck more by the idea of Hellboy, and then Hellboy 2 is the one that really realized
That was a
the
good
character.
Hellboy
fully.
2 was amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Like, I
Hellboy 2
remember us talking about Hellboy and being like, I remember that being a little better, but
Actually, Hellboy 2 is actually significantly higher on the list.
Exactly.
But I still think Hellboy 1 is like 8 range.
It is. It's good. But anyway, so that's what is above it there. And then below it, we have the Chronicles of Narnia Prince Caspian at a 7.4. The only 7.4.
Now, Prince Caspian seems a little too high to me.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I can just say I brought the score down. I was one of the few people who did.
I still think that movie's decent, but
I'm going to see what we gave Prince Caspian. 6.5 for me. 8, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5.
Who is the 8?
That shouldn't be a 7.5.
Irina.
Oh, there's an 8? Okay, never mind. Okay, fair enough. Contagion at 7.5. Let's move on to what critics thought. On Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has a 85% with a audience score of something that will make Noah happy, 63%.
I'm not happy that it's getting a lower score.
No.
I just don't like
just
it that
personal
much.
Kind of a,
opinion.
that was,
You don't
kind,
have
of a,
to
that was
keep
kind of a joke, but we'll move on. On Metacritic, it has a 70 and an audience score of 7.0, and on IMDb, it has a 6.8.
I think ours is kind of in the middle of.
No, it's exactly in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of all of those. There's a few higher scores, a few lower scores. We're good. The movie released wide on September 9th in 2011. Also playing in theaters at the time were The Help, Warrior, The Debt, Columbiana, a movie that we've covered, and Rise of the Planet of the Apes, also a movie that we've covered.
Man, I remember seeing all of those in theaters when I was working there. That's so weird.
The movie was budgeted at $60 million. What did this one make worldwide?
What did you say again? What was the budget?
$60 million budget.
$60 million.
David, what you got?
Considering what was out at the time, I'm sure I remember The Help being massive. When I was working there, that was the big one at the time.
Yep.
So I'm gonna say this one got shorted a little bit. I'm gonna go with 120 million.
120. Irina.
Let's do 125.
Noah.
I think it got more shorted than 120.
Oh, interesting.
I'm gonna say 100.
Okay, so I'm kind of boxed in here.
Irina is closest.
Dang, so it was high then.
Yeah, the movie made 137
Okay, so we were in the ballpark though.
Yeah, y'all were close. Yeah, the movie performed decently well. Not regarded as a huge success or failure. Kind of just a middle of the field, like solid 2-pointer. Yeah, fine. Again, the movie wasn't intended to have a sequel anyway, so that was kind of just like, all right, solid. Steven Soderbergh gets to move on, make another movie that he wants to make. This is basically one of those movies that it's not like you get to write another blank check as to what you want to make, but it's like, it just kind of goes by the wayside. It's like, yep, that was a decent, that performed. Good job. Pat on the back, move on. That said, because of the pandemic and the recent resurgence of the or interest in this movie and its newfound popularity, Steven Soderbergh is deciding to maybe make a philosophical sequel to this movie
called Coronavirus.
What does philosophical sequel mean, by the way? Like, I don't know.
Spiritual?
Yeah, and this was in December 2020, so we're still kind of like, are we actually going to get this thing? We don't know.
So was it in the works before COVID happened?
No.
Okay.
This was spurred by COVID.
All right.
But I still don't believe that it's really going to happen until I see it. Because, again, this was reported December 2020. So it's been over a year since he said that they're developing this thing. And we've heard no word of what it's going to be.
Under wraps. It's tight. It's sealed lips.
Yeah. But he said that if it is to come out, it's going to be something that doesn't directly carry on from Contagion, but it's going to be something that when you watch it, you're going to be, oh, this is definitely the companion piece to
So like Moon
Contagion.
to Mute?
Yeah, probably something like that. But other than that, we don't know anything, and I still don't believe it's going to happen. But weirdly, Contagion could potentially have a pseudo sequel in the works. Who knows?
Make it zombies.
Make it zombies.
But the sequel is like, oh, it turns out the people who died come back to life.
Yeah.
And what if it
Gwyneth
connected to
Paltrow
Walking
comes
Dead?
back, guys?
That would be the craziest zig that he could take with this. Is just like, oh, just go full on zombie movie. With
I
it.
know.
Kate Winslet is the villain of the movie.
All right. Thus ends our short franchise talk with Contagion. Yes, it is a valid film to talk about on Franchise Killer because, there is a little bit of discussion for a potential philosophical sequel. Next week, we're talking San Andreas, a far more realistic movie than Contagion.
So realistic, right?
As Californians brace for the big one, this movie shows you a very accurate depiction of exactly what's going to happen when that finally pops off. So we're excited to get into that movie next year.
We may or may not have a guest on that episode.
Oh, may or may not. We'll see.
We're going to find out. I don't know.
All right. We'll see y'all then. Goodbye.